and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 224 of Who's the Bossk, and we will be discussing the second arc's worth of episodes for the live-action Lucasfilm Disney Plus series Andor, a Star Wars story. And for that discussion, I have invited back on the show my friend and fellow Star Wars fanatic, Noah J. Nelson. Noah, how are you? Thank you for coming back on the show.
The force is strong with me today.
I hope so. Before we get in, we have a lot to cover, but I want to ask you how you've been. How are things over at noproscenium.com, where you cover all things immersive?
Oh, things are hopping. We've got the LA Immersive Invitational this weekend, which in my guise as one of the people who runs the Immersive Experience Institute is something we help put on it is co-presented this year by After Hours Theater Company and the Los Angeles LGBT Center, which is where it's going to be held. The showcases are this Sunday. I don't know if this is going to air before then or after.
It will.
Oh, yeah. Great. So, hey, if you're hearing this and it's before like noon on Sunday and you're in LA and you're like, I love immersive stuff, come on down. 8 teams will have been given 48 hours to make a brand new original immersive piece and show it to the public. It is my favorite event of the year, and it is happening on May the 4th for May the 4th Be With You this year, although that is not our theme because we don't want to put a hat on a hat on a hat, although maybe I'll wear a Star Wars hat.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get the audio version of this episode up as soon as possible after we're done recording, because I have a crazy weekend ahead of me as well. In fact, I have an additional episode I'll be recording, I think, on Saturday for May the 4th, and that will go up on Sunday morning. So your episode will be up today on Thursday.
Wow.
We are recording this live, by the way, on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. If you would like to comment along or ask any questions, we'll be happy to address them. Noah, this is your third time, I believe, if I did the math correctly.
I think so.
Who's the Bossk? And that means you've graduated to level 3 of the 5 Star Wars questions. I sent you the list in advance. Are you ready for these?
I am. I had answers. I've forgotten them, that I had answers, and who knows if I've forgotten them again, but I am ready to go.
Great. We'll fly by the seat of our pants. That's how this always works. Number 1 of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 3. What is your favorite Star Wars book or comic book, and why? I feel like you'll have a good answer for this one.
Oh man, I had an excellent answer, and I was actually gonna read something to you, but the day has been so chaotic that I forgot to pull up the text. Look, I am an old West End Games Star Wars fan because like that's how I rolled, and I was part of the dark times. That's all
literally rolled.
And indeed, some of the stuff that's critical to this section of stories comes from those source books. And the thing that is most precious to me in all of Star Warsdom is this poem that is in the Star Wars Rules Companion that starts off with, always the is and is not are made together. Always the hard and easy happen at the same time. Maybe over the course of this, I'll dig it out. I sometimes post it around. I'm sometimes the only keeper of this, but if I can dig it out, I will give everyone that, because it is my favorite thing in all of Star Wars, and it's in, of all things, the Star Wars Rules Companion, which was a supplemental source book.
So you're saying you're one of the only keepers of this. Does this mean that if I wanted to track this down and buy it like on eBay, is that not possible? Or
yeah, you could, but I'm like, if you try to track this poem down, unless you can get your hands on a copy of the Rules Companion, which I own physical copy of, and maybe have a PDF or two as well. You would not be able to see this. Although look, if you know the internet, you'll be able to find it out there. So it's not, but when it comes to like, it used to be that if you searched that phrase, like one of my, like my live journal was like the only place you could find it online.
Interesting. Yeah, very deep cut. I love it. Number 2 of the 5 Star Wars questions, level 3. If you could own a life-size working replica of any Star Wars vehicle, which would you choose?
I mean, it's a very pedestrian answer to say the Millennium Falcon, but like, think about it. It is basically an
Yeah.
RV. So like, we're talking like, any YT 1300 Carillion light freighter, you want to
Yeah.
customize it up yourself. Like, you don't necessarily want the Falcon because like that's Han's ship. Um, I will say, since the arrival of the Fondor Hall craft and Luthen's custom version of it,
Mm.
that does seem really cozy. That feels like the one bedroom apartment of space.
Yeah.
But I think I want to have space for my friends, so I'm going for a 1300.
When you said that the Millennium Falcon is an RV, basically, that reminded me, this might be something that you're familiar with. I remember seeing at Meltdown Comics years ago. Not was it Meltdown? Yes. Um, Patton Oswalt, the comedian, had created a gender swapped version of the cast of Star Wars in action figure form,
Oh wow.
and it took it was like set in like a 70s exploitation movie, and the Millennium Falcon was a van, kind of like the van from Pixar's Onward, like a rock and roll van. I enjoyed that quite a bit. I don't know where those action figures ended up after Meltdown shuttered and was torn down, but it's a
Oh,
little bit of ephemera out there. Go
oh
ahead,
God, you
Noah.
reminded me. You reminded me that Meltdown was torn down. Like I
Yeah,
try not to think about that all too often.
yeah.
I found the poem, by the way. Like, it
Oh,
just
great.
took me a moment. We can do that later, though.
Okay.
It's
Uh,
very short.
num Number 3, what is your favorite non-human sentient Star Wars alien species? So we're not talking about the creatures here like the Wampas and the Tauntauns. We're talking about something you could have a conversation with if you spoke their language. Noah, what's your favorite one?
Ithorians, because they talk in
Dorian.
stereo.
Yeah,
And also from those West End Games days, like, if you look up the old source books and they explain Ithorians, if you don't know what an Ithorian is, they are
yeah,
the hammerheads, right? So
yeah.
Hammerhead in the cantina, Doc Ondar at Galaxy's Edge, right? His den of
Yeah.
antiquities. That's Doc's an Ithorian,
Oh yeah,
and
there's Doc right
yeah,
there.
there's Doc. Oh, I'm jealous. You got a Doc. And they speak in stereo, which is really cool. And they in the West End Games, version of things, which is increasingly the real version of things. Thank the Force. Uh, the Ithor is this jungle planet, forest planet that they live on, and their cities float over it. So like
Okay.
the jungle, the planet's sacred, so they move their cities onto like hovering platforms. Will we ever see that in live or in animation? I don't know, but it's one of my favorite things, and they have a deep relationship with ecology, which I wish I was better about doing that. So Ithorians.
Love that answer. I love the Ithorians as well, mostly because it's just one of the weirder looking
Oh
alien
yeah,
species to me.
yeah.
What a great design. Um, Amazing choice. Love it. Number 4, what is your favorite piece of Star Wars music and why?
That would be March of the Resistance from The Force
Okay.
Awakens, because the Imperial March is beyond iconic, right? Like it has a
Yeah.
cultural force to it, no pun intended. Um, and the Alliance, the Rebellion, did not have. Did I say March of the Rebellion or March of the Resistance? It's March of the
I
Resistance,
think
right?
you said Resistance the first
Okay,
time. Yeah.
good, good, good. Um, uh, when that music hit, the first time I saw Force Awakens, almost 10 years ago, I popped because finally we had something. It's also great to drive to.
Great choice. Could you hum a little bit just so I'm sure I'm thinking of the right piece? Yeah, right. Excellent. Did we hear a bit of this
Sorry.
on the Rise of the Resistance attraction
Yeah.
at Disneyland?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Number 5, if you could go back in time and be present for the filming of any Star Wars live action scene, which would it be?
The duel between Vader and Luke on Cloud City.
Nice.
It's got multiple parts to it too, so you get to be there in the carbon freezing chamber. You get to be out on the the gangplank. I had those Micro Machine action sets when I was a kid, so I probably spent so much time imagining that space to actually be there and to see them working on the choreography and to see what got cut would be fantastic.
I think a few people have chosen that particular set, the carbon freezing chamber. And it really, thinking about it, it really is the centerpiece of kind of the entire franchise. It's the middle movie of the middle trilogy. And it's not the middle of that particular movie, but it is like the climactic moment, Han getting frozen there. It is so
Act
memorable.
3 kind of
The
kicks
lighting.
off. Yeah. Like that's when Act 3, like things get serious, right? Like that space is the moment when it was all fun and games up until now. And then Han Solo gets popped in there and you start thinking like Luke may not make it out of this one. And he doesn't really make it out. I mean, he does, but at a great price.
It would have been so cool to see all those sets in real life. Absolutely wonderful choice. Let's move on from the 5 Star Wars questions to Star Wars headlines for this week. So we had a revival of Revenge of the Sith, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, in theaters this past week. And it did pretty well at the box office. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know it was
number 2.
Successful. Yeah, number 2 at the box office. Successful for Disney. I don't know if 20th Century Fox. Well, yeah, obviously that's under the Disney umbrella right now. I don't know if that would have counted toward the 20th Century Fox receipts for that weekend, or Disney if they hadn't already bought it. Doesn't matter because they're all owned by the same people now. I do want to mention that Hayden Christensen, the star of the film, as Anakin Skywalker, and Samuel L. Jackson as Mace Windu, both popped up at El Capitan Theater for opening night last week. I think it was Thursday night when that movie was opening there in the heart of Hollywood. Noah, did you get a chance to see Revenge of the Sith in the theater?
No,
this week?
No, I'm stuck at home for all kinds of reasons, so I don't get to go out. And the El Capitan is just down the street from me. And it would have been nice to see Revenge, but I'll say this much: nothing will top the first time I got to see Revenge of the Sith. Like nothing will ever top that, because I got to see it as part of the MTV Total Request Live special pre-release screening at Skywalker Ranch. And so George was sitting like 3 rows behind me. Michael Rosenbaum, who was playing Lex Luthor at the time on Smallville, was like sitting like a couple of rows behind wearing a bathrobe. We were in there with a bunch of like MTV weirdos and everything else. And we were on the ranch watching the movie. So like, I think I only saw it one more time in a theater, because I'd have to go. I don't know. I'd have to have some other special space to go see it in. Sorry, everybody. I just stunted in a big, giant, awful, horrible nerd way, but like, I'm good.
I want to say that JC Reifenberg, who owns the Scum and Villainy Cantina, told me about going to that same screening. I'm not sure if you.
We should trade notes.
That right.
And see if he was the guy responsible for us having to listen to Good Charlotte 3 times in a row, because some people wouldn't dance, and we were getting very angry they weren't dancing because we were worried we were going to miss the screening, because we had to act like we liked Good Charlotte. Apologies to the Good Charlotte fans out there.
So moving on to production, having started on Star Wars Ahsoka Season 2 this past week, Rosario Dawson shared a photo of her silhouette from the set. I know that the actresses, I'm blanking on their names, the actresses who play Sabine and Shin Hati shared photos from having returned to the set. But it looks like they're getting rolling. The cameras are rolling on Ahsoka, which I'm sure, if I had to guess, I'm going to say it's probably going to come out late next year, late 2026. Noah, are you pretty excited for Ahsoka Season 2?
I don't like Mortis. I'm an anti-Mortis person. It's funny because I was introduced to the concept of like the father, the son, and the daughter via Rebels. So like I didn't have a reference for Mortis I went back and watched, because I liked Rebels, I went back and watched Clone Wars. I had like skipped over Clone Wars, and then we got to Mortis, and I was like, look, on a certain level, I can deal with it. Like I do not find it objectionable as the idea of like, hey, there are these weird Force users who, like, you could kind of perceive them as gods, but are they? Aren't they? Not so much. The idea that maybe we're going to get some sort of like, there is a holy trinity at the heart of the Force, that could actually make me like punch out until a hard reboot happens. So I'm honestly a little nervous about where the canon goes.
Interesting.
Because, the statues appeared, and not saying there isn't space for interesting story, not saying that there isn't really interesting, spaces to meditate on, how does the Force intersect with conceptions of gods and magic and all these different things. It's one of the things I love about the High Republic series is there are all these different, Force cults and how their own interpretations of the Force. And the idea that the Force ultimately is mysterious and can kind of support all these things. If that's where we land, I'm going to be very, very, very excited. But as we go through the process, I am nervous that we're going to land on something that says, there's a father, a son, and a daughter, and they are at the heart of it. And there's Abeloth over here, that we're going to have something, very didactic as opposed to mysterious.
I get where you're coming from. I think, like you, I also did not watch the Clone Wars as it was being released. I enjoyed Rebels, went back and watched the Clone Wars, and I was exposed to the concept of Mortis probably around the same time you were. And yeah, I think I'm kind of on the fence about it as well. And it depends, kind of exactly what you said. It depends how this all unfolds. I'm not ready to abandon the franchise because of it, but yeah, very, very curious to see where all that goes. And I love the idea of the expanding mythology of the Force. But yeah, I do think it walks a fine line between a little bit too far and just interesting enough. But we'll see what happens. Again, it's probably going to be more than a year before we see those Ahsoka episodes. But something that is coming out very soon is Star Wars Tales of the Underworld. That's coming out this Sunday, May the 4th. And 2 episodes of that 6-episode miniseries will be available to watch in the video game Fortnite. I'm not exactly sure how that works. I'm not a Fortnite person. I don't play many online multiplayer games.
Fortnite is the single most important venue for Star Wars. I don't know if you heard about this, but that's how everyone knew Palpatine had returned.
Right.
The message went out on Fortnite.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I did know about that. Sadly, I haven't gotten into the game since then. And yeah, this is where they did show episode 1 of Tales of the Underworld at Celebration a couple weeks ago, but you can watch the first 2 episodes in Fortnite, I think tomorrow morning. So that's 2 days ahead of the release on Disney Plus. Noah, what have you thought of these Tales of animated miniseries? And are you excited for Tales of the Underworld?
I feel like they've been, a little uneven. Like some of them I've really enjoyed. Like I really like the Count Dooku ones in the Tales of the Jedi. I really liked we had Tales of the Empire, and that was Elsbeth,
Morgan, Elsbeth,
and also Barriss Offee, right?
Barriss, yes.
Yeah, and I love the Barriss and was kind of neutral on the Morgan. Who was the other side on the Jedi? Oh, Ahsoka was the other side of the Jedi. And the Ahsoka ones are fine. Like I'm not a huge Ahsoka person, but I love Rebels Ahsoka. So like I've warmed up to her over the years. This one I am I'm really curious how they write their way out of what they did in the Dark Disciple novel for Ventress, because apparently they're going to address that head on. So I'm always really curious how they're going to deal with those things. And then, this one seems fun. And, maybe we'll see how Cad Bane got his, rebreather thing going on. And like, I'm not super attached to either of those characters, but I know, the people making it are, so I'm hoping they put in a really good effort.
Yeah. Having seen it, I can confirm that is addressed the character's death at the end of the Dark Disciple novel. So, prepare for that. I guess I won't say anything more. And we will have an episode here on Who's the Bossk after Andor ends completely. We'll do an episode about Tales of the Underworld. That's just kind of getting pushed back a little bit because there's just so much going on. Speaking of May the 4th, though, there's a ton going on at Disney parks coming up this Sunday, including specialty food, merchandise. They're premiering this new reclaimed and reforged storyline for Savi's workshop where you build your lightsaber. So there's new parts you could build your lightsaber out of. And I think once you go into Savi's for the actual process of building the lightsaber, there's a new storyline that plays out in there. So if you have your extra 200 and whatever bucks it costs to buy a new lightsaber, you can go and experience that. I know you're a Disney Parks guy, Noah. What was the last time you went to Disneyland or Galaxy's Edge, and when's the next time you're planning on going?
Oh gosh. Oh, the last time was when someone took me for Star Wars night, I think a year ago.
Okay.
And the next time will be the next time someone takes me.
Okay.
Because that's where things sort of stand right now.
Fair
I'm
enough.
really curious about the new Savi setup because I don't know if they switched the central chassis of the Savi lightsabers yet. And the one I got, which I got very close to opening day of Galaxy's Edge, like stopped working a couple of years ago, and I need that chassis replaced because that's my lightsaber and I need it fixed. And I don't know if the new ones are using a new body, which could make it hard for me to get replacement parts. But if anyone knows, please tell me. I really want to know.
I will say one of the parts broke on my Savi's lightsaber, and I don't know if there's like a warranty, a length of warranty on this, but I just brought it into the park and they handed me a new one. I don't know.
I watch that happen to people all the time, and I don't know if there's a length or whatnot. So I just wonder if if they've switched models, then they might not have the parts anymore. And that's the thing that's fair. That's stressing me out. Like it's my lightsaber, right? Like that's the magical thing about Savi's is like it's your lightsaber. Yes. It's one of the most special things.
I feel the same way.
Yeah.
No, totally agreed. And speaking of merchandise and collectibles, is a good segue to start talking about some merch news that came out in the past week. Hot Toys has revealed their, and it's not quite Emperor Palpatine yet. I think it's Chancellor Palpatine right after, he's revealed as Darth Sidious from Revenge of the Sith, and then Darth Plagueis. No, not Darth Plagueis. That's wrong. I put the wrong note here. It was Darth Nihilus. I just corrected it in my notes. From Star Wars. What was it?
Star Wars. It's Knights of the Republic 2, the Sith Lords.
The Sith Lords. Thank you. No,
I don't have notes in front of me, people.
Right. There you go. And also a concept art version of Darth Maul. He's wearing some kind of raincoat. I don't know. I didn't know what that was.
Ian McCraig? It was one of the Ian McCraig
I guess
ones?
so. It must be it. Yeah. Those are all available, I think, for pre-order from Hot Toys at Sideshow Collectibles. Those are expensive too. Those are like $200+ each, but they're really, really nice. And then Sideshow also has a new life-size Grogu available. This was available at Celebration and it sold out there, but now you can pre-order it at the Sideshow website. Any of this appeal to you, Noah?
I don't have the budget for Sideshow, but I do appreciate one thing about this, which was when the pictures of the Darth Nihilus were going around, it made me realize something I have not realized in the 20-ish years or however long it's been that the Sith Lords was around, that Darth Nihilus's cloak basically gives Darth Nihilus cat ears. Never picked up on that until this figure. Like I was looking, I was like, oh, Nihilus has cat ears? Like it's cat ear cloak. Like it's amazing because Nihilus doesn't actually have cat ears, but the shape of the cloak makes it look like Nihilus has cat ears. It's fantastic.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Look at the picture. If you're not looking at it right now, go look at the picture. You will see the cat ears. Disney, pay attention. People want Sith Lords with implied but not actual cat ears. And think of the cloaks you could sell. The cloaks
leaving money on the table.
So much money on the table.
Another good segue going into our main topic for today's podcast. You can now stream Volume 1 of the Andor Season 2 score. What have you thought of the music so far this season? Before we talk about the episodes themselves,
I had trouble with with some look, Nicholas Bertel's score for Andor season 1 is one of the best pieces of music, like collections of music that's come out of this new era, barring John Williams, right? Like it leapt above. And when it first started, I was kind of like little piano stuff. And like the guy from Secession, like it's gonna be that stuff. Like, I don't know. And like that whole suite of music became part of my heavy rotation listening. So shifting over to the new guy whose name is escaping me at the moment. I will say, like, there's a couple of pieces in that first set of episodes that I thought were delightful and fantastic. Like, I really like the remix of the Andor theme as he's going like into the hangar with the Avenger, and it starts to feel like, it's Nicholas Bertel's Andor theme as interpreted by someone working on Mission Impossible. So I really like what he does with it there. And the Gorman, all the stuff with Gorman is really fantastic. But as much as everyone loves Brasso, which is the track that has the new remixed version of Niamos, I was actually kind of disappointed that we were like leaning on that and not getting a new piece of dance music that like, and there were other pieces that just kind of felt a little too like early 2000s television for me. All that said, I think that the music we get in the second arc, nothing took me out at all. And in fact, all of it kind of really worked, just like tense. I'm really looking forward to hearing this next batch of music because it felt kind of more in line with the sounds I expect out of Andor.
Great. I did look it up, and his name is Brandon Roberts. He scored movies called Underwater and Thanksgiving. I think that was a Eli Roth thing. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I kind of, I'm right there with you as far as feeling about the score this season. Let's get into our main topic for this week. It's Andor, Star Wars Story, season 2, arc number 2. Before we talk about these episodes, Noah, what did you think of the first arc, last week's first 3 episodes? And what do you think about this decision to release this entire season 3 episodes at a time?
So we'll start with the first part first. And so the first arc didn't land as high for me as any of the arcs in season 1. Not because I didn't like it. I think it lands higher than 95% of television and 68% of movies for me. So it's still up really, really high. But there was something about that set that didn't click for me as much as this week's does. And we'll get there. Part of it was like, there is that desire to kind of like jump into the story and how little time we have left with these characters. And so it let itself breathe, it let itself reestablish the characters, it let itself reestablish the world. So there was a lot of that, we're putting pieces on the board. I think it's going to hold up to repeat viewings a bit more. And I think that is actually linked to the second question, which is, I understand why they did what they did. And why I mean Disney Plus, not Lucasfilm, not Tony Gilroy. Right. Because from everything I've seen, I don't believe that Tony Gilroy knew this was going to be the plan for the release. And in some ways, and this kind of touches on something that Liz was talking with you last week about, that season 1, episode to episode, like those didn't feel like television episodes. Like they just sort of stopped, it just sort of stopped. Like we ran out of time, moving on. That felt like something you could have dropped each of those as a single little movie and gone on. This season so far, across all 6 episodes, I feel like every single one of those feels more structured like an episode of television. It ends in a real spot where you're sitting going like, oh God, what's going to happen next? There are cliffhangers or there's moments of tension. Like there's a real sense that you got a full meal in each episode. And so now it's like the proverbial, taken around back to smoke an entire carton of cigarettes. It's like there's so much jammed through. And the way I used to watch Andor was I would watch the episode. I would watch the episode again the next night with the subtitles on so that I caught anything I might have missed because of the sound mix maybe being a little too muddled, which we have some of that this week. And then I would sometimes like listen to a podcast I like and like rewatch the episode right before I did that. And then the next week episodes would come. So like I would spend 3 hours on Disney Plus with the material we had each week on each episode. And I had no time to rewatch 3 hours worth of television before we did this. I'm running off of one. You've gotten to see everything. So like you probably tapped back in and rewatched, but like there's something to be said for letting this stuff breathe. And I understand the business side of it, but I think on a art culture side, I think it was a mistake this time to do it this way.
Okay.
And I think like we might have seen more momentum. We will know at the end of the day if the viewership numbers go up or excel or whatnot, if there's growth in the pattern, which is what they're looking for. And they've got the data and we don't. But as a cultural object, I could have used a lot more time with each episode, particularly this week's set, because we are feasting. We are so feasting.
Right. Yeah. And I'm going to be asking each of my guests who come on to talk about Andor what they think about this strategy. And so far we're 50-50. Liz was in favor of it. And you say it's a mistake artistically, maybe not so much on the business side, but we're not on that side. So we don't really know yet. And speaking of Liz, when I finished that episode last week, she had a definitive heart out and I accidentally left out a question that I very much wanted to address. We didn't bring it up at all. And that was Cassian's little B story, or I don't know, was Cassian his being held captive by the Maya Pei Brigade? That did kind of feel like a B story to me. But I wanted to get your take on this. What was the message? What was the meaning behind the infighting that was happening in the Maya Pei Brigade that allowed Cassian to escape? What's Tony Gilroy trying to say with that, to your opinion?
Have you ever been to Twitter, Michael? So I could not help but instantly start thinking, once they came out of the edges of the jungle there on Yavin and we saw what we were dealing with, I could not help but instantly start thinking about, online leftists in particular, or a tendency to like form a circular firing squad. In this case, a literal circular firing squad at one point. There's some heavy-handed cultural commentary going on here, which is deeply appropriate for Star Wars. Like it's not supposed to be subtle. It's Star Wars. But even there, you see like Tony, doing comedy with it in a real way. I mean, the whole fact that they're doing this, version of rock, paper, scissors, 5 hands, and this sort of sense of like, here are people who want direction, they want change, they want to stop the world that they know and replace it with something better, but they cannot agree on what that is. They've lost a significant figure because, the Maya Pei Brigade is not called the Separatists. It's not called the Gorman Front, right? It's not called sectorists. These are not human cultists, right? Like you go down the list of what Saul was talking about. And indeed, Maya Pei, is referenced. These people don't even don't even refer to themselves as neo-Republicans. They are the Maya Pei Brigade. They have lost their charismatic figure and now they are directionless. And because of the directionless, they are kind of doomed. And I think it also does something really important for this story in terms of where it sets Cassian. A lot of people said like, oh, this is pointless. It took so long. Like, why are we here for so long? And I'm just like, patience. Like, I think the only thing that sadly we're not going to necessarily see pay off, and I cannot look at you while I say this because I know you've seen the whole show at this point. The only thing I'm sure we won't get seen pay off, and don't say anything, is Cassian's sister, right? Like that we have to absorb as something emotional to deal with, and not something that we can deal with in plot, and that some things you just have to let go of. And that's going to be thematic, even though it's literally the first thing we started with, and that sets all the action into play.
Mhm.
We're going to have to resolve that thematically. Maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe I already am wrong, and I'll be so happy. But I think here, Cassian doesn't show up to consult on the Gorman front setup with the same attitude if he doesn't watch the Maya Pei Brigade get themselves killed. And then there's also the question of, did any of those fools survive to the establishment of, Yavin 4 base, like the
Right.
core base? Because that final reveal, I popped, right? Because I was also frustrated. It was supposed to be frustrating. But like he pulls out and you're like, and you pull back and you see we've been on Yavin this entire time. I screamed. And that's what the kind of storytelling we're in. There's even something in this set of episodes where, I had a reaction where I was like, why did we do that? And then other people like completely losing their minds, be like, oh, it's such a waste to do this thing. We'll get there. But it absolutely makes sense, because it's like, no. There's more coming. You just got to have a
Right.
little patience. That's the kind of story we're in.
Right.
We'll get there.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're seeing the evolution of the Rebel Alliance as we go along here. And we will go along and get into this week's 3-episode arc. The titles of the episodes are Ever Been to Gorman? I Have Friends Everywhere, which is kind of the code phrase. And then What a Festive Evening. Not ominous at all. Directed by Ariel Kleiman, same director as last week's 3 episodes. Written by Bo Willimon, who did a movie called The Ides of March. He also did a TV show, and I forget which one
House
it
of
was. House of Cards.
Cards.
Yes,
slightly
exactly.
important television show.
Yeah.
Sort of created the streaming era from a certain point of view.
Right. Isn't he on board to write an upcoming Star Wars film as well?
So a couple of things to remember. One, he did
Yeah.
Narkina 5, right? So his is
Yeah.
the Narkina arc in season 1. And he is the current writer. We must say the current
Right.
announced writer of the James Mangold Dawn
Yes.
of the Jedi piece. And I could not be happier that man is who is assigned to that mission. And I just hope that stays true. There have been plenty of great writer hires that have then been replaced. But Bo, I realized this week, Bo now has effectively an entire Star Wars trilogy worth of filmed material now. We have essentially a trilogy's worth of Bo Willimon Star Wars. Not quite as much as we have of Lawrence Kasdan Star Wars. And for me, I think, and all respect to Tony, he's the master storyteller here. But I think when it comes to like who's the writer, I think Bo is my favorite Star Wars live action writer after Lawrence Kasdan.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's pretty high praise. Let's
Very
say
high
hi real
praise.
quick to our friends at Skywalking Through Neverland who tuned into our Andor discussion. I really wish they would give us the episode titles when they send the screeners. I had that issue as well. I had no idea of any of the episode titles, and then as they're coming out, I'm like quickly typing those into my recaps before I publish them. And it informs your opinions of the episodes right away. That's an interesting point. Yeah, we do have a different experience than those watching on Disney Plus, because we don't know the episode titles going into those screeners.
Well, and if you watch early enough on Disney
Go ahead.
Plus, sometimes it'll just say episode 16.
Yes, right.
Get there early, you'll have the same experience.
Cinematographer again was Christophe Nuyens, and the editors, same as last week, were Matthew. Oh no, sorry, this was a new editor, Matthew Cannings from Black Mirror, and then John Gilroy was back again from Rogue One. I think he did the second of the 3 episodes. What did you think of this arc, Noah? Just general reaction to these 3 episodes.
This might be my second favorite arc of the series after Narkina. It's tough because, you know, the Daughters of Ferrex Rick's Road duology is just so good. I will say this: the last episode, I spent the entire heist sitting on the arm of my couch. I crawled up onto the arm of my couch and I felt sick to my stomach as those two scenes, one of the heist going on and then of Clea just desperately trying to get the bug out of the artifact.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to vomit. I was crawling out of my skin. So good. So good. And just all of the textures. Like, this is, you know, Star Wars doesn't have to be this all the time. Star Wars shouldn't even be this all the time. There needs to be space in the grand tapestry of Star Wars for this kind of storytelling, for this kind of, you know, treating this universe, this galaxy as a big tapestry that's got a lot of this material that you can then marshal up and put in service of a really grounded story that is about people and ideas. And I think the fact that we have, you know, Tony show running and putting the pieces in place, and you have Bo, you know, doing the scripting and you know, breaking story beats, right? But like the way the, you know, we know the writer's room is a little bit more like a television's writer room to some degree, that
Mhm.
you have all of these eyes on it, and it really feels like everyone's bringing out the best in each other. And I'm over the moon. And if this is the high watermark, and from what I hear from everyone who's seen everything, this isn't even the high watermark of the season. Like, if this was the high watermark of the season, I would already be like, yeah, it was all worth it. And the fact that it seems like this isn't even the high watermark, oh baby, don't set my expectations too high. I don't want to be disappointed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Before I give my opinion,
I
I
kind of
want
liked
to go to
it.
before I go to my opinion. Johnny C says he wants Bo Willimon to run his own Star Wars show. He thinks a young Palpatine series. What would you think about that, Noah?
I have some very specific ideas about what like
Okay.
Palpatine's story should be. I can take them offline to folks. Maybe at some point, I think there's some, yeah, I almost want to be like, I don't want to pitch what I want to pitch. Look, whatever Bo wants to do, whenever Bo wants
Yeah.
to do it,
Okay.
like let him cook. I don't know how much Bo wants to, because, you know, also Bo wasn't really a Star Wars person before
Neither
coming
was
into
Tony
Andor,
Gilroy,
and
right?
neither was Tony Gilroy, right? So,
Yeah.
but you know, if he's got something that he really wants to say, and so that's also why I'm really curious, like, because, you know, he hasn't really grappled with the Force, and the idea that that is the guy who's telling the Dawn of the Jedi story, you know, um, that's really interesting to me. I want to see that most of all.
Okay. Ronald Dixon also says, I love Toy Story, which I do as well, but we're talking about Andor, and I'm going to tell you what I thought of these 3 episodes. When I first got the screeners, this is probably 3 weeks ago now, or a little bit more, I crammed them. I watched all 12 in 2 days,
Good Lord.
and this arc was my least favorite. I posted my letter grades for each
I
arc
saw.
when the embargo dropped, and this one I gave a B minus. But when I watched them this week, when they were released on Disney Plus with my wife, I upgraded my grade.
What's your
They
grade now?
finally
Because I saw your grade.
clicked for me. Yeah, they clicked for me. There were a lot of little things that didn't work for me that first time through, and right now I'm at like a B plus or an A minus.
Okay.
So, I will say a lot of it has to do with my brain just not being very fast, because there were a lot of little questions that I had, like, oh, that doesn't quite make sense. And then rewatching it, and we'll go through the specifics of this in a bit, but rewatching it, there were like 3 or 4 things where I was like, oh, I understand that now. I understand why it happened that way.
Yeah.
It didn't play right to me the first time. So if you're like me, if you're on the fence about these episodes, watch them again and pay attention to the little moments, the little plot machinations that I didn't quite grasp the first time through. And I will say you'll enjoy it more. Go ahead, Noah.
Yeah, that's why I don't like a binge, because you'll when something's this dense, and this is super dense. It's super dense, and it's also playing in the spy, the wartime spy genre. And it's all about a little thing here, a little thing there. And yeah, like it's super economical, sometimes too economical. Like I got some problems. Even though I love this, I have some problems with some of the stuff they did in terms of, they're almost cutting to the bone a few times.
Not everything is spelled out beat for beat. I will say you have to connect some of the dots here yourself. And Skywalking Through Neverland agrees that you have to watch the second arc at least twice. It is dense, and I definitely agree with that. The first specific thing I want to get into here is the progression of Bix's arc in this season, because we deal a lot more with her PTSD from her torture at the hands of Dr. Gorst, and she gets into a little bit of a drug addiction here. That's another heavy topic dealt with in this season of Andor. And then we get kind of the resolution of the Gorst plot line here at the end of this arc. So how did you feel about all of this stuff? How did you feel about Bix's arc in these episodes, Noah?
So one of the things that's interesting, I think, here, and again, like, you have the advantage of like having the full view. So again, I'll avert my eyes so I don't get any like little somatic cues from you.
Okay.
I feel like this is a step in Bix's arc as opposed to like full on resolution. I'll say that if Bix is now sort of resolved at this point after these 6 episodes,
I want Bix is not resolved.
No, I know that. I know
Yeah,
the actress is still around, but like this particular aspect of her, right? And so, and Dave, don't tell me, like yay or
no.
nay,
I'm just saying,
right?
Yeah. No, I won't say anything else.
Yeah. But like, if this aspect of Bix is tied off with a bow here by this, like the PTSD, the trauma, the like who the trauma is turning her into, then I'll be like, oh, well, I don't think they pulled it off. I think where I'm standing right now is this feels like a really interesting step, a really compelling place to go. What it does sort of, kind of contrast into is, and there was so much controversy last week because of the attempted, sexual assault, scene, and the idea of us, we got to reach, are we traumatizing this character just to re-traumatize this character? Like it's a very high stakes thing to do. And this feels like it's resolved the Gorst part of it, which we were carrying. And if you're a fan of the show, you were carrying. And so I feel like there are more bets being placed on Bix. The actress can totally handle the chips that are being thrown her way. And it becomes very important to me that this character continues to get layers to her. So I'm more invested than ever in what's happening with her, not because of what happened last week, but because of what happened this week, the fact that she's closed the book on Gorst, but what now? What kind of person is she becoming? And, where are we taking that? So it feels very, very high stakes storytelling. But I don't think they haven't cashed every check they've written yet. So it matters a lot that they get that one right.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I definitely will not say anything that is not
so
revealed by these first 6 episodes. I do love that final scene with Cassian and Bix in this arc, where Bix basically goes on a solo mission into wherever he's stationed now on Coruscant, and takes him out. And then the very, very tropey, very cliche, calmly walking toward the camera as the explosion goes off in the background, but it works so well.
Cool guys don't look at explosions. Those are the rules. Yeah. No, I thought it was a fun button. It's also one of those moments that, like, I could have used maybe a little more breathing in, like but I think economically it all works. Like at the end of the day, that works. I felt relief that we saw the explosion, because like all the, like, well, he's there, and then all these things. Oh, now the evidence is blown up, right? So it becomes like the mission. You can start to imagine for yourself. The mission was, hey, Luthen's like, guess what? Gorst is here. You're super motivated. Go take it out. You decide how you're going to deal with it. And that the two of them concoct a scenario where she's like, I'm going to get this guy. And I want my time. And Cassian is like, of course, like whatever you need. And then we'll make sure that no one will know it was you, because I'm going to blow the whole thing up. And so she got what she needed. They could have just blown it up. But they didn't. They managed to make it both personal and efficiently professional. And I love that.
And Johnny C says he loves that she has a slight smile on her face when the building blows up behind them. Yeah.
Wouldn't you?
Let's talk about exactly. Let's talk about Gorman. This is the sort of the centerpiece of this season. You can tell because they built a big set for them to wander around and for action to play out in. Cyril. I gave them a couple.
Oh, names.
Good. Cyril and Dedra, they have a plan to infiltrate the Gorman front. And I thought it was interesting. So a lot of people predicted going into this season that Luthen might actually want so we know that there's a thing called the Gorman Massacre. This is established in Star Wars Rebels. It's from Legends canon as well. People predicted that Luthen might actually want the Gorman Massacre to happen to help spark the Rebel Alliance to form and spark people rising up against the Empire. But it's interesting to me that the way it's actually playing out is both Orson Krennic in leading this operation on Gorman and Luthen are trying to get this uprising to happen, the same thing to happen, for very different reasons on both the Imperial and the Rebel side. What do you think of all this stuff on Gorman, Noah?
Well, I mean, Luthen's an accelerationist, right? Like Luthen, I mean, he's expressly an accelerationist. He wants the Empire to close its fist. In so many ways, like Leia is also an accelerationist, right? Like when she tells Tarkin, like, the more you close your fists, the more systems will slip through your fingers, right? Like that. This is a key cornerstone of a certain type of revolutionary thinking. And what I find interesting about this juxtaposition that you have Krennic and indeed the Imperial war machine, and you have Luthen both wanting there to be something horrible to happen, is twofold. One, there is this idea that if something horrible happens, both sides say like, we're going to win. Like if we can break Gorman, we get what we want, but we also break the spirit of everyone. It's why Tarkin destroys Alderaan. We're going to break everyone's spirit by showing them that we have ultimate unlimited power, that there is nothing in the universe that can stop us from putting everyone in their place. And the rebellion side of things believes that when a state actor does such things, it will inevitably cause people to resist, that it will show the cruelty, and that by showing that futility, by taking people up to that line, you tell them, well, there's no reason not to fight because you're already dead. Right.
Yeah.
Which gets, Saw talks to this, and if it, in a metatextual way, it's interesting because it's also, you think about Forrest Whitaker plays Ghost Dog in Jim Jarmusch's Ghost Dog. And there's a lot of reference to the Book of the Samurai in there. And one of the poems he gets to read in that movie is about a samurai who behaves as if they're already dead. Right. This idea, if you take people up to that point, that is when revolution becomes possible. And thus it also becomes the show and the writing team sort of talking to us, both as students of history and as people who live in history, about, where they think things go. And that Star Wars, for all of the cycles of violence, for all of the cycles of oppression that lead to rebellion, that lead to some relief, and then it comes back around again, that at the end of the day, what this story, what this collection of stories is about the point that from a certain point of view, sorry, it's stuck in there. That expression of power, that expression of cruelty is kind of futile because people will push back. But how we get to that point and how to make it count, that moment that you give it all, that's what it feels like this whole story, all the way up through Rogue One, ultimately, and Star Wars winds up being about. And that's just, I hope that answers the question, because it's thrilling to me on a thematic level.
It does. Our friends at Skywalking Through Neverland say that the parallel between Luthen and Krennic is fascinating. When Luthen says, "Then Gorman will burn very brightly," Richard and I looked at each other and said, "Wow, Luthen's he's willing to do anything to get this revolution to happen."
And also, and talking, I mean, so much of this particular one is about Luthen being a monster. Luthen tells Cassian in that moment, just a few moments before, like, you need to think like a leader. And a leader is going to sacrifice pieces on the board, because Luthen is fully, people are utility. Although we also have moments. There's a question you have about another scene. Luthen is a monster, but he is not fully gone.
Right.
He walks a thin line here.
And we'll get to that in a bit. I want to talk briefly a little bit more about the Gorman massacre. Again, not saying anything at all past episode 6, but I do want to ask you actually to confirm, because I'm a little fuzzy on this. The Gorman massacre originated in Legends. Did it originate in that West End Games role-playing game?
So the first reference to Gorman, and this was reconfirmed on Blue Sky the other day by Pablo, so it's real.
Okay.
Pablo Hidalgo, just for those who don't know, the people watching live definitely know.
Yes.
So in the Rebel Alliance source book, which came out in that first couple of years of the West End Games, there was a line about how, Tarkin basically killed some people on Gorman, and that incident was critical to the formation of the Rebel Alliance. And it was, in fact, and this is something I had forgotten, it was in fact dated to like the first years of the Empire. Now, we've been living for the past few years with knowledge that the Gorman massacre is what finally moves Mon Mothma in BBY2, which we get to this coming week, to, make a speech, remove herself from the Senate, and then we get to see exactly what happens in Rebels, right? Like, we see in Rebels the aftermath of that, and that forms Rebel Alliance. What no one predicted, and what I popped for this time, was that Tony Gilroy was going to sit there and be like, why not both? Why not have Tarkin crush a bunch of people with a spaceship? But I'm not going to film that because it's expensive, and then have that be timed to what it was in the West End Games canon, which is where us deep lore goblins live, right? And we go like, 3d6 plus 2, like that's where we live, right? You're sitting there watching an episode of something and you're like, oh yeah, that's on page. I one time accidentally called the exact page number for Force Transference. And I hadn't looked at the book in like 25 years. And I'm like, man, there's something wrong with me if I can do that. Right. So all that stuff is there. And he managed to give us that and give us whatever's coming next. And I was one of those, I popped many times during this cycle. And that was one of them, because it just, and it's not, yes, it's deep fan service in the most ridiculous way possible, but it's also creating layers of tragedy, layers of meaning, that have resonances. And it's so exciting to have a creator, particularly someone who expressly was not a fan of Star Wars before he was working on Star Wars, come in and show such reverence to what other people other than George has made in order to tell the story and explore the ideas that he wants to tell. And the franchise doesn't often operate like this. Like, some people come in, they swing around and like, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to flip it all on its head because I want to show you how clever I am. And by treating this like this was like a history that needed to be reconciled, he's opening up something that stops being about moments and starts being about systems and of oppression, and starts being about, echoes in history, which at the end of the day, as George likes to say, like, they rhyme, history echoes, history repeats itself because we won't learn a lesson. And out of that, you get both a Tarkin massacre and a Gorman massacre. So I don't know. I thought it was okay.
Man, you are the exact. So I approached you about talking about this arc after having seen it, knowing that you would know about the Tarkin / Gorman massacre, and you delivered. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, all power to Pablo for reminding us all of like that, right? Like my copy of Rebel Alliance is in storage right now, I think. Maybe some of the other shelves. So.
Let's talk about what Cassian Andor himself, our title character, is doing on Gorman in these episodes. Luthen sends him there to kind of meet with the Gorman front and help them plan out their little rebellion on that planet. But he decides, he kind of opts out of this mission after chatting with them and checking out some of the layout of the city. Why do you think he abandons this task, and what do you think it says about the difference between Cassian's approach to the rebellion and what Luthen is up to, and the other operatives that get sent in, Vel Sartha and Cinta Kaz?
So, I mean, this is where the Maya Pay Brigade stuff starts to pay off. Whether it pays off more, I don't know, but this is where it starts to pay off. He's had that experience. He's watched, people who don't know what they're doing chase after things. And he knows they're doomed. And Cassian isn't interested in sacrificing any more folks. He isn't interested in dooming people, paying a price that won't lead to anything, or something that's just a symbolic, just a moral victory. Cassian wants a material victory. But he's thinking on a smaller scale. Luthen knows that, a Pyrrhic, I can never remember how to say that right, victory in this moment, is going to ignite more. It will burn brightly indeed, or burn very brightly. I can't remember exactly the exact phrasing, but those are two different perspectives. Both are valid. One is a lot more human, and that's Andor's, and that's who our lead character is, and that's very appropriate. That, like, even though the Cassian we meet at the beginning of Rogue One is amoral, right? Like, shoots a contact just to like keep it. He has become who Luthen wants him to be by the time we meet him. The Cassian who dies on Scarif is the Cassian we see now. He's returned to himself.
Yeah.
Right. Which, if that speech he gives the technician in episode 1 of this season, right? Like, you're returning to yourself, like you're back to who you really are. Right. Like, that connection is what's so key, of Cassian's story. And it's something that we need to remind ourselves, like, who are we doing this for? And you know what? At the end of the day, the plot, the story as it's told, completely vindicates Cassian, because, the Gorman, they're not ready for this. They're just like they're a bit more sophisticated than the Maya Pay Brigade. They are play acting at being revolutionaries, and the seasoned revolutionaries pay a significant price for that.
Absolutely. And I want to say the Cassian arc in these episodes that was one of the small things that did not add up for me my first time through. And this week, when the episodes were finally released and I went into them again, I was like, well, let me try and figure out what they're trying to say, because it felt like a false start to me. But I wanted to understand why. And I think for the reasons that you just explained, I got it this time. let's get into Mon Mothma. Mon Mothma has a smaller role in
Yeah.
these episodes than she did in the first arc. First, we see her at the Senate trying to, is it pass a bill or veto a bill? I think
unwind the PORD, right? Like
right,
get that was supposed to be a temporary measure, and now
right.
it's being like, codified.
And that the PORD had to do with the prison sentences or
Yeah, the very reason why Cassian wound up like, on a what was supposed to be a 6-year stint for what should have been like a 2-month crime or whatever it was the
right.
PORD.
So she's having trouble getting that rescinded. And then also we get a fun scene with her at the Imperial Ball and a confrontation with director Krennic.
Oh.
What did you feel about, how did you feel about Mon Mothma's role in these episodes?
I mean, after having gotten so much Mon last week, I was sort of shocked that we got less. But what we do get, particularly Skulden's party, right?
Yeah.
Like that party at Skulden's, oh my God, knowing that there is more footage that they shot because they had to like have the conversation go while the other part of that
Yes,
scene was taking
right.
place. Like, I know this show doesn't have a lot of outtakes and they refuse to release them, but I'm just like, can you just give us like a 2-camera cut? I just want to watch Krennic and Mon Mothma like arguing about, like being snippy with each other. What a wonderful, delicious scene. As someone who, spent a lot of time with his Western Game Source books, imagining like spy capers in Star Wars.
Right.
This is what I live for. And that particularly that scene was going on while the heist is going on. It's just so beautifully edited together that the tension just keeps rising and rising and rising and rising. And at the same time, the dialogue's getting better and better and better. And the way the characters are, it's so good. I really can't wait to like rewatch it. I nearly just rewatched that part alone before we did this. But I didn't, because I think there's so much, not necessarily in terms of lore that's to be gotten from that scene, but just they're executing at such a high level, and watching actors get to position themselves in moments like that. Like, as someone who was an actor once upon a time, you live to get to play those scenes with other actors. Like that's all you ever want to do, because it doesn't require you to run around. It doesn't require you to like do a bunch of complicated blocking. You just get to stand there in cool clothing and like be really just like doing your best to mask your true intentions across from your scene partner, while both of you know what you're really saying, but no one's going to say it out loud. Like, that is why you act. So it's really fun to get them watching them do that.
Agreed. Johnny C says, going back to the Tarkin massacre, I love it because it gives more power to the coming one, being that it happens in the shadow of the first one. Yeah, it just kind of compounds there.
Yeah.
And then Kiki and Luca loves Andor, and she says the ending with Bix was phenomenal. Agreed. We talked about that earlier. There's a few more things that didn't quite click for me the first time through and worked so much better for me when I watched it this week. One of the other B stories that worked on those lines for me was the Wilman and Saw Gerrera B story, which, by the way, takes place on Dakar, which is the planet where the Resistance has their base in The Force Awakens. We see it also at the beginning of The Last Jedi when they're evacuating Dakar. So
I popped when we saw Dakar. I was like, oh my God,
My guess is they had access to that same location, and they were like, yeah, why not use that again? But I just found it, especially on this rewatch, there's another contrast being displayed here between the way Saw Gerrera works as a freedom fighter and the way Luthen works putting together the rebellion. And I especially loved the first time through, I was thinking, well, Saw Gerrera is just coming across as a crazy person here. I didn't get the point of it.
Course, and he's crazy. You have to be insane.
And then this time through, I really paid attention to that final rant he goes on about the gas Rhydonium and using it as a metaphor for the rebellion. Noah, what did you think of Saw's
With the
little
Rhydo
part
kid.
play? Yes.
With the thing that explodes. It's so I'm my biggest issue with that is just like I think the sound mix there was a little muddy. I watched the show on it's on Apple TV with like my AirPods in, so I'm not disturbing the rest of the household. So I usually get pretty good with the sound, and like I was having trouble like picking out, maybe something slipped in the settings. I'll double check. I mean, one, who doesn't like a Forrest Whitaker speech? If you don't, like, I'm sorry for you, because you're missing out on, you're not equipped to enjoy one of life's great pleasures. And here we have a screenwriter working in full on metaphor mode and getting to do what this show has done, which Star Wars doesn't usually do, which is let characters have monologues, let there be poetry in the speech, let the souls of these people come through the words, which is why you like plays, which is why in plays led to television, right? They're called screen plays, not screen scripts, right? They call them scripts too, but like the play is in there for a reason. And what a glorious moment, and also like difficult to like parse out, because we don't want to see anything bad happen to Willman. He's had so much bad happen to him already, right? Like, here's a guy who suffered, and yet in so many ways he suffered the same way that Saw has suffered. Like the moment when Saw calls the Rhino his sister, like this also gets back to the textures, right?
Yes.
So like on the one level, like they're digging through West End games. On another level, they're digging through the Clone Wars. And like Rhino has, Rhydonium has come up before. I saw someone making reference of like, oh yeah, like Gregor, one of the clones who's like nutty, like it sort of implied that he's huffed too many Rhydonium, tanks in his day. And so there's this thing in here where somebody, when they were maybe asking like, well, why does he do this? Or like, can we have him be this way? And like, well, there is Rhydonium, and we could make it like this. And they zero in on something that creates a whole layer of texture for, or reveals a whole layer of texture that's kind of already there in the world, and then puts it to a purpose in terms of advancing the positions of the characters in the story, and then caps it all off like a beautiful dessert topping with this absolutely spectacular speech, which at least right now in my assessment, comes in number 2 behind Luthen's speech to Lonnie. Also, we didn't talk about it, but like, I love the fact that we got another Luthen Lonnie in the hallway moment, particularly like Luthen coming out of the shadows, like, almost like he's a Sith. Like the visual storytelling here this time was just also operating at a super high level. Like, I'm going to so enjoy watching these again.
Yes. I also loved Saw Gerrera's using Willman as a way to kind of weed out an Imperial spy in his ranks.
Yeah.
Which didn't click for me. I didn't get it the first time. I didn't get that he was kind of playing a long game there. But
was Saw playing a long? That's the thing. The thing about Saw is like he could have been playing a long game, or he could have just been spur of the moment. And that's the beautiful thing about the way they write him about the performance is like, you don't know if they just lucked out. You don't know if he would have just decided like, oh, it's this guy. But he does know that the guy came from Luthen, and he knows Luthen is pretty cagey. So that probably helps.
I will say my read on it this time through was that he suspected that the other dude, Flutie or whatever was his name, and used Willman as a way to kind of weed him out. But let me know what you think when you do rewatch it.
I will.
Let's talk about Luthen and Clea. Their B story this week was there's a listening device planted in an artifact that they have sold to Davos Skolden, and Clea overhears via the listening device that Skulden was sold a fake by another collector, another antiques dealer, and they have to go through the entire collection and make sure everything is authentic. And this sets off a panic that results in that very tense scene that you mentioned at the party, the Imperial Ball, or whatever they're calling it later on, where poor Lonnie has to block the view of all the Imperial officers.
He's not a wide
Wow.
man either, right? Like if you're
Right.
gonna pick someone to block people's vision, I would not pick Lonnie of the ISB as my first choice. I'd pick him for a
Yeah.
bunch of other things, but like stand there and look wide is not one of his core competencies.
Anyway, when I first watched this, I was like, well, it doesn't make sense to me why they would be so sloppy to leave, you know, like, and to me, this is, again, when I rewatched it this time, that's the point. The point is that they're overreaching, that they're extending beyond their grasp, just like the ISB is doing by arresting too many people and not having enough resources to interrogate them all. Anything you would like to say about that plot line?
Well, and also like, you know, they have to keep an eye on Skulden, right? Because here's someone who is critical to their entire operation.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know that it's their operation. He thinks
Right.
he's just helping Mon move money around, particularly because we haven't heard Tay's name, but the implication, you know, is that Tay's probably off the board, right? Like no one's saying the name Tay Kolma. The closest we get is maybe an insinuation that like Cinta had an accident, and said accident involved that speeder that we saw in the previous episode. And so they've got to keep an eye on Skulden. And there's a little bit of like, who's gonna disassemble an ancient artifact, right? You know, like this is the perfect place to put a bug. So let's put a bug and let's get it in there good, so it doesn't rattle around when they're moving it, you know? And so it gets stuck. I loved, because that first inclination of that, I believe, was in the second episode of this arc, right? So this whole storyline started in the opening music. The music starts up, and then we get the distortion of the radio coming in, and we hear Ryloth 7124, right? And then this, that, the other thing, right? And it takes a moment to figure out what you're hearing is like the recorder is telling Clea which channel she was listening to of the various feeds that they're pulling on, and that the fractal radio has become this like super essential part of the story. It's a wonderful prop. It explains a lot of how the communication goes. But to your point, also, they are super overextended because they have to be. You know, they're put into a situation where they've had to overextend themselves. And unlike the ISB, they've just got at the heart of it Clea and Luthen, and that is not sustainable. And so really starts to like put things into play. And you know, it was not clear to me who was going to get out of what in the climax of this, particularly because we had both together. Like once Cinta had gotten shot and the other plot wasn't resolved yet, I was pretty sure we weren't going to get a double fail. But so gloriously tense, maybe the most tense few minutes in a Star Wars ever. And there have been a lot of tense things in Star Wars.
Yes. For a second, I thought at some point somebody like Krennic was going to notice a drop of blood on the ground, because we saw the blood dripping down Clea's hand as she dug into that key. And this gets me to one of the this is the last thing I didn't quite get on my first viewing, but my understanding now of the very end of the episode that we kind of covered earlier is that Luthen may have, again, there are pieces missing. We don't see every beat of this. You kind of have to connect the dots yourself. But I think Luthen gives Dr. Gorst to Bix and Cassian as a gift. So we see Lonnie near the beginning of one of the episodes. I think it's the third episode. He learns about Dr. Gorst's new assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the episode, we see that light blinking in the distance of the skyline. And then we see Cassian and Bix go and kill Dr. Gorst. In my head, on the first time through, I thought they just took it upon themselves to track down Gorst. But now I kind of, it makes that arc makes a little bit more sense to me. What was your interpretation of that?
Yeah, no, my interpretation of it is like where you landed. And I also felt that that was also one of the spots where like it needed a little more oxygen or needed that ability to go back, right? Like they have constructed this show so that you get more out of it on subsequent viewings. And so being sort of forced to like get through the story, I can only imagine that the second time about the blinking light, if that's reinforced, because I believe that's introduced in episode 2, if that gets reinforced, or maybe it's late in episode 1 of this arc, if you see that again, you start to get familiar with it. It's important. It's a mission. Yeah. Something's going on. You can start to put the pieces together because they want you to. That's the nice thing about the show. They want you to put the pieces together. They want you to play along and see if you can follow. And when things are being kind of shoved at you, like you can be like, And I think emotionally, it feels a little more compressed because we don't see the beat of them meeting with Luthen. We don't see the beat. We're just left to our own devices, which is absolutely fine. But when you're sort of, forced in our case, or in the case of anyone who doesn't want to be spoiled online, when you're forced to watch a 3-hour movie every week, you're gonna miss some stuff.
Yes. Or 12 hours as I was with.
Not yeah, man. It would not. I don't envy you that. Like Axis is great, but like, geez.
This is funny. Johnny said the same thing about the drop of blood, probably right around the same time that I said it. Getting into character deaths, we had one additional recurring character pass away in this episode. That's Cinta Kaz, R.I.P. Cinta. And my question to you is, because we did hear Vel say earlier in the episode that she only agreed to go on this mission if Cinta went along with her. Did her... So much of Star Wars is about personal connections, personal investments. Did her relationship with Cinta, is that ultimately what got Cinta killed?
From a certain point of view, of course, yes.
Yes.
Right. Which is why she's carrying, Vel's gonna carry that guilt around, right? As much as when she's talking to that stupid boy who shot Cinta, she's holding back tears, and the actress is doing a great job of holding back the tears. Like that is it is not easy to get your eyes to water exactly like that and not burst like that. That was a great take they were able to find in there. Inevitably, Vel feels that way about it. Right. There's also, look, it's impossible not to think in the moment of we're operating underneath two tropes here as well. We're operating under the trope of, if you have sex, you die. Happened to Tim, right? Tim, first person to have sex, just off seeing Star Wars, gets got minutes later or an episode later, right? And here's Cinta and Vel, and it's a death warrant, which not necessarily seeing. There's also folks who quick to the line to be like, oh no, it's the kill your gays trope, which that little light went off in my own head, thinking like, oh. And then you look at the composition of the story, and one, it's a war story, and two, you only have so many characters that people are deeply entwined with in this cast, that sadly sort of becomes like, well, if you're going to have someone lose a lover, your options are, you either you off Bix, or you off Cinta, or you off Vel. Like those are the relationships, we have it, if you're going to do something like that. And it's a war story and it's a love story. As Diego Luna has like gone on record saying, like, really, this season's a love story. And you guys aren't watching the Declassifieds, which are like little extras for each episode, do so. It also lets you sort of stay in the headspace of the show for an extra 12
I have
minutes.
Not watched those. So
oh my goodness, you've got to watch them. They all the questions I had about the Gorman language, they answered in those. Like they fully answer that. So like I would like to watch that. I did not go to bed wondering like, because I don't speak French, like wondering what the hell I just saw. I went to bed knowing exactly what I saw because I explained it for little old me and little old you as well.
So Cliff's Notes, it's not French, right? It's a new language.
Cliff Notes, they did, maybe what you think they did. They made up a language, but they hired French actors and told them to speak it with a French accent. And the one complication to it is French and German actors. The one complication to it is when they made up the language, and they went like we're going to make up the language route on this. Which isn't always true in Star Wars. Sometimes they don't make up the language. Sometimes they just go like, "Oh, we want you to say poodoo because we think it's funny." Like that's the George method. This is a different method.
Right.
They hired
the
a linguist.
Tolkien method.
Yeah, they hired a linguist, and they said, "We're gonna hire French actors, so use the phonemes from French so it sounds natural coming out of their mouths." And oh boy, you also can see on Reddit where like francophones talk about it. They're like, "Oh, this was so unnerving because people are speaking. It sounds, my ear can't focus because it sounds like people are talking my language and they're not. It's pure gibberish and it's driving me nuts." It's really interesting. Also, I instantly thought, like, you know what? I would bet you $5 right now, 5 credits right now, that Dave Filoni is going to use this as an excuse to do the same thing, but with Japanese. We're gonna have a made up language that's going to use Japanese phonemes, and they're going to hire Japanese speakers.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm saying that a man who put Zatoichi, style, like in as a canonical Jedi thing, he's got to be sitting there going like, oh, we could do that. And frankly, I thought that was utterly brilliant. But back to the death, like you're only left with so much, and you don't like to see, stuff that was debated on Tumblr like 5 years ago, like rear its head again in terms of, you don't like to see things broken down just into tropes. But again, tropes are unavoidable in storytelling, right? Like sometimes I think a great disservice has been done to everyone that we think exclusively in terms of tropes and archetypes. These are some of the tools and the textures in storytelling. And the question becomes, if you're going to have to do it, if you're going to wind up deploying it, are you doing it to purpose? And are you doing it in a way that everything winds up feeling earned? And every human being has a different barometer for that. They're calibrated differently in terms of whether or not something feels like, you got to break that thing out. And here I'm very sad to see Cinta go. I'm sad to see that actress go. I'm a little more put off by the horror movie rules because now I'm watching for like, will it happen again? But I feel like someone was gonna go. We're gonna lose more people, and that sort of starts here. Like I don't think we're getting out of a single arc, and I'm not gonna look at you. I don't think we're getting out of a single arc without a familiar character being lost to us. So the question is, who dies next week? Is the main question.
Yeah, and again, I will not say anything past this week's episodes, but I did say to Liz last week that it felt like a winnowing down or a narrowing down of the cast as we hurtle toward the finale. Kiki and Luca said, cool thing about the show is the female characters organically badass. Johnny C says, at first I felt the bury your gaze trope, but this was a rare case where that feeling was fleeting because honestly, it was the right choice. I didn't want it to be, but in this story it was. And I say this all the time, but a trope isn't always a bad word. Okay. Before we wrap up here, Noah, we do have to touch on the recasting of Bail Organa from Jimmy Smits to Benjamin Bratt. I read Tony Gilroy's little blurb about this. He talked to Entertainment Weekly, I believe, and said basically Jimmy Smits wasn't available, so they had to make do. Benjamin Bratt is a great actor. To me, this is also the right choice if you can't get Jimmy Smits, and you'd need Bail Organa in this story, in my opinion. I don't know. How do you feel?
I think I don't think you can tell the story of the formation of the Alliance to restore the Republic without incorporating Bail Organa. If you can't get Jimmy Smits and you have to settle for Benjamin Bratt, oh boo-hoo, you had to settle for Benjamin Bratt.
Exactly.
I do think, and look, I will cop to something. Like when he showed up for a second in this episode, I too had the, dumb thought of like, wait a second, they recast for that. And then you sit with him moment, it's like, no, you don't recast for that alone. There are people out there on like social media who like boldly running around yelling, like, I can't believe, why would they do this? And of course, Tony's already on the record saying like, we want to get that out of the way. We want everyone to see him and like have the reaction.
Rip the Band-Aid off.
Yeah, rip the Band-Aid off so that when you see him again, you're not going like, that's not Bale. So you can actually hear what he's saying, right?
Yes.
And deal, which means that, like Bale seems to be important and as he should be. And it's rough. I also think, we do have this unfortunate, we've been blessed in this franchise in that we have these really spectacular actors who sometimes accidentally have been cast, like Genevieve O'Reilly, in roles that are literally afterthoughts in so many ways, that can then be used to a great full effect. And we don't want to not have these people be part of those stories, but we also wind up in situations then where technology is then being invented so that someone else can wear Mark Hamill's face. And, we have a grand tradition in humanity of passing roles on to people. How many Batmen have there been in our lifetime?
I think the plural is Batsman.
Oh, Batsman. Yes. How many Batsman have there been in our lifetime? No, please. I actually love that. Like, look, do we count Adam West as part of that? Because that was the first one I saw. And we have these iconic characters, and it's fun to watch an actor take a crack at an iconic character. We have Ewan McGregor as Obi-Wan Kenobi because they recast the part with a younger actor. And now he is more Obi-Wan for everyone, even us OGs, than Alec Guinness was.
Certainly for more screen time.
Yeah. And look, and Alex Guinness is definitional, but also like Alec Guinness ultimately kind of like probably hated the fact that he was making those movies. Right. And Ewan loves that stuff. And you know what? That's the glory of bringing fresh blood in to revive roles. And would it have been great to have Jimmy? Of course it would have been great to have Jimmy. But do you want to wait another 6 years? You can't. Then you'd have to recast Cassian. Diego Luna only has so much time. He's like Logan's Run with a chip in his hand.
Yes. Yeah. Before we wrap up here, Noah, I want to point out 2 fun Easter eggs. The security guards are watching a pod racing race when Cyril's going back into his office. And then there's a Star Speeder, a Star Tours Star Speeder in the travel agency when Cassian is peering through the window, as our friends at Skywalking Through Neverland pointed out to me. I did not notice that.
Like a toy one, or it's like outside?
A model. No, it's a little model. Sorry, yes. A model of a Star Speeder. So you got a little Star Tours reference in there. Anything you did not like about these episodes, Noah?
They weren't 9 hours. They weren't 9 hours long.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Anything. I mean, I'll say honestly could have breathed a little bit more around very, again, that I love the button, the Bix button on this episode from one angle, and another angle I was like, oh, we could have gotten a little bit more in there. It's executed. What we got is executed flawlessly. If you walk away from an episode just wishing you had more time, more moments, but you feel like you got everything, and if things catch up, like it's hard. Yeah. It's hard for me to complain about anything in particular.
Very true. Johnny C said, my only complaint is Benjamin Bratt should have worn lifts, as Bail Organa, I guess, is a little shorter. My complaint about these episodes goes along with what I said last week about needing more aliens. I do think I would have liked the Gorman to have been aliens.
You know
That would
what?
have felt a little more Star Wars to me.
I am gonna like hard disagree here because I think they
Okay.
did something interesting with the gore in that, um, one, they've invented a culture and they've really invented a culture and they've done, this language difference. And they're also playing to some degree on tropes about the French. Like if
Yeah.
you're an Anglophile,
Yeah.
an Anglophone person, Anglophile is different. If you're an Anglophone person, you know, the French, are thought of being arrogant and everything else. And they're playing into that. They're using those tropes wisely and smartly, and they're also showing the ability to have like a real cultural diversity amongst humans. I think at the end of the day, like, it is sad, like the production saves money by not having
Yeah.
too many aliens. I would love, do I want to see some Ithorians? Yes. Do I want to see an Anzelian here or there? Right? Like, does every alien have to be a weird shaped head that's just like slightly out of frame in a party scene? Like, can't we have something? Could have we just had at least one significant? Could have had a Jar Jar in this all? But like the glimpses we get and some of the designs we do get are good and fun.
Yeah.
So and really, the story is trying to tell a story about, class as much as anything else, and isn't getting to the speciest side of things. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think that's the story we're in is about how humans are screwing over other humans. Sorry.
Fair enough. I brought up a comment here where Johnny C said earlier, good old Space France, and I've been calling it that too.
Yeah.
Space France, Gorman.
Yeah.
Let's see. Johnny also said, I think it would be harder to get across the French revolutionaries allegory if they were aliens. Fair enough. Let's see. There's
And
6
also that
episodes
idea, like
left.
it's an alien culture, even though it's human, right?
Yeah,
Like it's so
sure.
weird and specific, like the
Yes.
squash the bug as a version of,
Yeah.
right? Like that's so
Up
interesting.
yours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gorlectopods. We're at the halfway point, Noah, of Andor season 2. What are you hoping for? What are you expecting
The world
as
to
we go through
end
these final 6
after the
episodes?
last arc, that we just don't have any more world. Like it's like happily, there was just
Wow,
Andor and it ends.
that's dark.
I mean, my, I just want to see it. I want to see what happens. I'm deeply curious about, I want to get a little more Luthen, but maybe not all the answers. Um I want to get some more interesting little tidbits of, this larger world that exists beyond the story that we're in, right? Which we get with things like references to the Rakata invaders and the Shandimal, and
Yeah,
honestly with Dakar, right? Like clearly Dakar is, left over from some previous engagement. Like I don't think that Saw built that. So it was like,
right.
was it an old Clone Wars? Like this idea that war is such a constant in the galaxy that people are just reusing old
Right.
fortresses over and over and over again. So honestly, the fact that we're going to get more about Yavin and maybe get some time, we could get some time at the Masai temples and Yavin. That's what I want most of all.
All right. I won't confirm or deny whether that happens or not. Let's wrap up our conversation. I think we can both say we really like these episodes. And I said it earlier, but I'll say it again. If they didn't connect with you, watch them over again, revisit them, and I think your opinion will grow as mine did. Our final segment here on Who's the Bossk is called First Steps into a Larger World. This is where we talk about the media we're consuming and or enjoying outside of Star Wars. Mine has a Star Wars connection, but it's not Star Wars related. Liz mentioned a movie last week called Conspiracy that she was reminded of because of the scenes with the Krennic meeting in last week's arc. I went and watched that. It has Stanley Tucci. It has, who else is in it? Kenneth Branagh. Great cast. It's an HBO movie, so it feels like a lower budget kind of thing, but really enjoyed it anyway. And it's about a real historical event, so it's informative. Yeah, check it out. It's on HBO Max, or as they call it, Max. Noah, do you have a choice, that something that you've been watching or reading or playing lately that you would like to talk about?
Yeah. Yeah. I decided to zero in on a comic book, specifically the current run of New Gods, written by Ram V. And the art is by, there's a small group of artists who are kind of like tapping in on each issue. I think Ethan Cagle, don't quote me on that, is one of the primary artists. Um, this is a fantastic evolution of the DC Comics fourth world mythology. You have Ram V, taking what Kirby laid down and bringing his own twists on it, drawing upon his own history as someone from from India, and bringing in some Hindu mythology vibes to the whole thing. Um, it's really gorgeous. It's fascinating. It's big space opera that, like touches on superhero stuff that also, and it splits its time equally between a kind of, almost grounded, but not really, like action story about a small group of characters. And then this absolutely huge, like mythological level, like, war amongst the gods thing that's happening. But it manages also to not, replicate any of the stuff that's been done in the fourth world mythology before, which has often felt like people just trying to retell a Kirby story, and sometimes succeeding and sometimes not succeeding. It's the most exciting things they've done with that stable of characters in a long time.
Oh, sweet. Yeah, Johnny agrees. He says New Gods is a top 3 book for me right now, and if I'm not mistaken, Johnny C owns a comic book shop in the Midwest, so
Nice.
he would know. He also said he wants some Rebels reference in Andor coming up. Just a mentioned connection would be
From a
nice from
certain,
Johnny.
okay, I said from a certain point of view, we kind of have a little bit of that because not a full on character, but Mon Mothma's attaché
Yeah.
does show
Right.
up in
Yes.
Rebels,
That's right.
right?
Yes.
So like that character was in the episode where Mon
Yes.
Mothma shows up. So that may be as close as we get, but hopefully we'll hear at least, like General Sandula to the waiting room, please, or something when we're on Yavin, right?
Right.
You know,
So yes, as you mentioned, Erskine Samaj is the name of the character, Mon
yeah.
Mothma's little assistant there, and that character originated in Rebels. So there you go. You already have your Rebels reference. That's going to
We
bring
all
us
want
to
to see
the end.
Chopper.
Yeah, that's going to bring us to the end of this week's episode of Who's the Boss. Big thank you to my guest, Noah J. Nelson. What a wonderful conversation. I knew you were the right guy to go to about this arc. Thank you so much, Noah. Where can people find you? Where do you want to send people on the internet if you want them to find you on the internet?
Best thing of all is to go to noproscenium.com. You can do it on the web to find the website I run, which is all about immersive entertainment in all of its forms, from the physical to the digital. And you can use that same address to find us on Blue Sky. And then if you want to see me, like, wax poetic on Star Wars or other things or the real world, I'm also on Blue Sky. And you can find me, via the noproscenium.com account on Blue Sky.
And hey, I hope the LA Immersive Invitational, Los Angeles Immersive Invitational goes well for you this coming weekend. On the next episode of Who's the Boss, like I said, we're going to have a May the 4th episode coming this Sunday, and that will be about having rewatched Revenge of the Sith. So look forward to that just a few days from now. As always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. I'm on Instagram at Who's the Boss Pod. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you so much out there for listening or watching live here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. May the force be with you. We'll see you real soon. Thanks again. Bye.